So now that we're further into Season 13 of Diablo 4, I think a lot of players that are still playing are at the experience farming portion of the season, where they probably have all of their builds, they probably have quite good gear, so now people like that are just trying to farm experience to potentially get 300 Paragon during this season. So in this video, I want to go over what is probably the best and most consistent experience farm currently in Season 13. And this is technically a glitch, but I'm not sure if the developers are actually going to fix this method anytime soon. Now, first we have to go over this method that is essentially a glitch that will allow you to infinitely and freely use this farm. Now, this is using the method of infinitely refreshing nightmare dungeons through the Warplanes system. So essentially, if you go start a new Warplanes playlist, you just want to choose as many nightmare dungeons as you possibly can. I think you can have up to 3 per playlist, because what you're actually looking for is a nightmare dungeon with the Forgotten Wisdom affix once you enter it. Because anytime you get to a nightmare dungeon in your Warplanes playlist, you can either use your own key or own sigil to go complete a nightmare dungeon to complete that part of your playlist, or you can just click teleport to dungeon and it will open up a dungeon for you. Now, how this works is whatever dungeon it sends you to will have one affix in that dungeon that will continue to be that affix no matter how many times you run it. So let's say you start up a new Warplanes playlist run, you get a nightmare dungeon, you teleport to it. So just use the Warplanes playlist teleport. It'll teleport you into that dungeon, and that dungeon will have an affix. So you can go to your map and check on the top left and it will tell you what affix it has. And let's say it's the Forgotten Wisdom affix, which is actually the affix you were looking for this infinite experience farm. So what you would then do is you would go through and complete all of that dungeon except the final part. So clear out all the enemies of that dungeon. Do not kill the final boss at the end or complete whatever the final objective is. You want to clear out the dungeon, but not actually complete it. And once you've cleared out all the enemies, you're just going to teleport back to town. Then you are going to go to your map, go to your quest log, and at the bottom there is a reset dungeon button. You're going to reset the dungeon, and then you are going to use the Warplanes playlist button to teleport back into the dungeon. Now, even though you're resetting the dungeon and it's closing it, and when you teleport back, it'll open up a new one, even though it's opening up a new one, it will always have the exact same affix. So if you get the Forgotten Wisdom affix, you can now infinitely farm and reset that dungeon, and it will always stay with the Forgotten Wisdom affix. And I've gone over this specific glitch method previously, and when I first went over it, it would actually change the dungeon it was putting you in, even though it was keeping the same affix. But currently for me, it is not changing the dungeon anymore. So anytime I reset the dungeon, it just puts me back into a reset version of that exact same dungeon with the same nightmare dungeon affix. And the one I'm farming that you'll see in the video is the Path of the Blind dungeon. So I go through and clear it. When I reset the dungeon, it'll put me back into the Path of the Blind dungeon with the same affix. But the dungeon you get on your playlist that has Forgotten Wisdom could be any dungeon, and there will be dungeons that are significantly stronger for doing this specific farm. And I think any dungeon that has all of these spiders and the spider hosts would actually be the best ones, but pretty much any of them are still going to be quite good. And while there's a bunch of ways to increase the efficiency and increase the experience and loot you can get from this farm, which we'll go over later in this video, that is the base method. You're just going to go to your Warplanes playlist, you're going to choose as many nightmare dungeons as you can, and you're just going to keep running through your Warplanes playlist until you come across a dungeon that has the Forgotten Wisdom affix on it, and then you are not going to complete that dungeon because you'll just be able to infinitely refresh and refarm the dungeon. Now, if you don't know why we're doing this with Forgotten Wisdom, there's 2 parts of a Forgotten Wisdom affixed dungeon. First off, there will always be the experience shrine somewhere in that dungeon that just gives you a 15% bonus experience boost for, I think it's up to 2 hours. And while that will help with all of the enemies you're defeating, that's actually not the main reason you are farming this dungeon. The main reason is because any enemy you defeat in a Forgotten Wisdom Nightmare dungeon has a chance to spawn an experience globe. Now, these experience globes are the same exact ones you find in Hell Tides, you find in Undercity runs, or you find pretty much anywhere else in the game. And once you're a little bit into your Paragon levels, these globes will be giving a little over 1.7 million experience, but that's where they cap out. So no matter if you're level 200 Paragon or level 299 Paragon, they will give 1.7 million experience. But this is still by far and away the best experience farm you could possibly do. So once you get that dungeon, you're legitimately just going to go through and clear out every enemy. Don't complete the dungeon, so don't defeat the final boss at the end, and then teleport back to town, reset the dungeon, teleport back in, rinse, and repeat. And because you're just trying to defeat every enemy within the dungeon, no matter what, every single enemy can drop a globe. This also makes things like cursed shrines, cursed chests, and the random events you can come across significantly more useful, because if you come across, let's say, a cursed shrine, you are just going to be sitting there for the 30 seconds to a minute as the waves constantly spawn, and every single one of those enemies can drop these experience globes that will all give the 1.7 million experience. So even if you're doing this at really high Paragon, like I think 275 or 276 in the footage, you will see just picking up these things actually move your experience bar. So you can go do this no matter what level you're at, and this will be an incredibly good experience farm. It's obviously going to be very strong for lower Paragon levels, and if you're just starting out in the endgame of Season 13, I would definitely recommend doing this if you're trying to get some early Paragon levels very quickly, because pretty early on in Paragon levels, you will get to this cap of 1.7 million experience per globe, and at those lower Paragon levels, that is a ridiculous amount of experience, so you'll just be leveling up very, very quickly. Now, like I mentioned, there are a bunch of ways to make this farm even better, not only just for experience, but also just for getting a good amount of loot while doing this. Now, the things we're going over, which are all going to be in your endgame skill trees, are primarily going to be focused on getting more experience. Some of this stuff you may be able to change a little bit to get more loot, but most of the stuff is just going to give more loot on top of that. So let's start with the Nightmare Dungeon tree. And first off, you want to go down the left side, which is the red side, because there are some pretty big increases. The first node doesn't matter. The second node is the most important one. While in a Nightmare Dungeon, slaying an enemy while you have a shrine buff on you traps your soul. When the shrine buff ends, all of those enemies respawn. Now, this is obviously incredibly strong because anything you kill in a shrine buff, it doubles because they all respawn at the end. Every single one of those enemies can spawn an experience globe. So when it comes to experience, this is very, very strong. And also a really good combination is clicking a shrine. It ends up being a corrupted shrine. You will get the buff right away. So all of the enemies you're killing with the constant waves of spawning enemies will then also be doubled and respawned at the end of that shrine buff. So you can essentially get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of enemy kills just through this one corrupted shrine, which will probably give you dozens of experience globes. So one corrupted shrine can legitimately give you tens of millions of experience. And then the node below that is also very good for more experience, but also really good for additional loot, which is when you activate a shrine, up to 7 elites can ambush you. So this will just mean pretty much any time you click a shrine, some random number of 1 to 7 of elite enemies will spawn, which will help a little bit for more experience, but it can also help with additional loot on the right side nodes we're going over, which are the blue side. These are all for goblins. So the first one, treasure goblins have a chance to drop a Nightmare Sigil with a treasure breach affix, which obviously be very good just for loot. The second node is killing 20 elites across Nightmare Dungeons will reveal a Heraldric altar, and activating it will spawn some amount of enemies, whether it be goblins, butchers, random elites, etc. But the upgrade we're taking for this is anytime you get this Heraldric altar to spawn, it will only spawn treasure goblins, which is much better than the other options, and then those treasure goblins can drop the treasure breach affix Nightmare Sigils. So this will just add more treasure goblins within these dungeons as you're going through them. And then the final one is Greed is Good. Anytime you kill a treasure goblin, it can spawn the Goblin's Retreat portal, which will just take you to its own special goblin dungeon, which are tons of goblins in there, resplendent chests everywhere, and then a special boss at the end. There's a very low chance to get this, but you might as well have it active because you'll be getting goblins throughout your dungeon runs. And also, this is 25 elites, not 20. I'm not sure why it still says 20, but it requires 25. And also, I'm pretty sure the buff, you have a little buff showing you how many kills you have. That's just a little skull on your buff bar. I'm pretty sure that stays while logging out. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be the case or not, but I think sometimes it does stay. So if you're going between runs, sometimes you'll be able to keep that buff between that. But it's just anytime you kill 25 elites, essentially, you get this altar to spawn a couple of treasure goblins. And then for the Helltide tree, you go down this left side, and the only things you really care about are at the bottom of these yellow nodes. So Night Terrors, you have a chance to be ambushed by Hellborn in Nightmare Dungeons. They have a chance to drop Profane Mind Cages when slain, and you can take either one of these other nodes. These are a selector between the two. You can either have up to 4 additional Hellborn spawn to attack you, and they have a higher chance to drop uniques. So this one is more so if you just want more Hellborn, which will give you more experience, and all will have a chance to drop experience globes, or you can get Meat Brothers, which will cause 2 butchers to spawn instead of the Hellborn. Now, if you actually take the butcher node, they always drop a lot more loot than the Hellborn, and it will always be the 2 butchers. Now, if you're not a super strong build, these butchers are crazy overtuned, specifically when it comes to dealing damage to you. Even in my build that has over 22 million toughness, where I get a full health bar barrier every like 2 seconds, even then these butchers can kill you if you're not careful, but either one's gonna be fine. You're just getting essentially more elite spawns, and also if you get a shrine and kill either Hellborn or the butchers within the shrine, they will respawn at the end. So whichever one of those is completely fine. And then we have the Undercity tree, which you don't actually need. The only reason I'm taking this is because at the bottom of the middle section, you have Idols of War. The Ancestral Tribute of Armaments can now drop throughout Sanctuary. So essentially just doing anything throughout the game can now drop these Tributes of Armaments, which when you get 5 of these, you can turn it into a Mythic Tribute of Armaments. So these just give you a small chance to now get these. So let's say you go and kill a Butcher. There's a very small chance one of these can drop. You don't need this, but it just adds a very low chance to get one of these, and if you're doing this farm anyway, you might as well have this active. And then finally, you have the Lair Boss skill tree, and really the only thing you need from this is out in the cold. When fighting a boss in a Nightmare Dungeon, a beast in the ice has a chance to appear and attack you. Now what this actually does is anytime you kill something that's considered a boss, this is butchers that spawn from your Helltide tree, this is randomly spawning butchers, this is randomly spawning X-Vals, anything like that will just drop some uniques from the beast in the ice fight. That's also why anytime the butchers through the Helltide tree spawn, they spew out a ton of loot. It's because they have their loot, and then they also have this beast in the ice loot as well. And I'm not sure if the Hellborn from the Helltide tree are actually considered bosses or not. I think they're actually not, so that may give you less loot if you choose the Hellborn instead and are using out in the cold. This is really the only thing you want. It's just additional unique loot drops, which can also drop mythics as well because it's considered to be loot from a boss. So anytime those random boss enemies do spawn in the dungeon, you could also get mythics from them using this node as well. But that's the entirety of this experience farm. It's easily the most consistent experience farm in the game. The only other thing I think could come close is going into the nodes in the Helltide skill tree, where when the worms pop out, they spew out a bunch of enemies that drop a bunch of experience globes. If you can consistently get worms, that could be better, but this farm is so much more consistent that I think over time, this farm will just be the best. It's also quite easy to do because even if you're like in Torment 12, doing Nightmare Dungeons is significantly more easy than trying to do high pit runs or trying to do boss ladder bosses on Torment 12. Everything in here is going to be much easier to kill, especially since you're not even facing against any bosses or anything like that. So you can definitely change up your build a bit to have much higher movement speed, or to have teleports through runes, or to have movement skills. So there is a lot of ways to make this even more efficient because it's generally just easier enemies to go farm. But that's all I want to go over. So thanks for watching.